What if the exact sales script, the one you've just meticulously memorized, is actually insulting your prospect before you even finish your first sentence?
Well, it's a really sobering reality to face, right?
Yeah.
Especially considering just how much faith we place in the script itself. We tend to treat it like a mathematical formula, like you
Uh-huh.
just input the right words and output a closed deal.
Yeah, exactly. You spend all these hours like practicing in the mirror, getting the inflection just perfectly right. You have every single rebuttal lined up in your head.
Oh yeah, you walk into that room feeling completely invincible.
Right. But the hard truth we're exploring today is that having the quote unquote right words means absolutely nothing if you are, fundamentally misreading the human being sitting across the table from you.
And that is the ultimate blind spot for so many professionals. I mean, you see these incredibly articulate, highly prepared individuals completely lose a room.
Yeah.
And they walk out to their car afterwards having no idea why it went sideways.
They always blame the product, right? Or the
Mm.
price.
Always. The price, the timing, the market. They rarely realize it was the delivery of the message, not the actual message itself, that caused the failure.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive today. Over the course of our time together, we are going to unpack the final, really crucial pages, specifically pages 14 through 17 of the opening chapter of a book called Sales Scripts That Sell.
Right, by Thierry Gamble and Michael Gamble.
Yeah. And the chapter is titled Why and How to Use Sales Scripts That Sell. But what makes these final pages so fascinating is that they just completely pivot away from the mechanics of what you actually say.
They pivot entirely to the psychology of the listener. It really is a masterclass in human dynamics. The authors make this really compelling case that true persuasion is not just some acting exercise where you hit your marks and deliver your lines.
Right, it's about mastering all these unspoken languages. We are talking about nonverbal cues, cultural shortcuts, the hidden dynamics of age, and, the deep-seated socialization of gender.
And if you are listening to this right now, this matters to you because we are operating in a highly globalized, hyper-diverse marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. Adaptability is the ultimate currency right now.
Exactly. If you cannot adapt the script in real time to the specific human being in front of you, I mean, you are leaving massive opportunities on the table. The context of the sale has permanently shifted.
It really has. You aren't just selling to your neighbor anymore, someone who shares your exact cultural background, your age bracket, your worldview.
Right. Today, your prospect might be a high-level executive from East Asia or a tech founder from South America, or even just someone raised in a completely different generational paradigm right in your own city.
So let's start with the physical delivery that accompanies your words. Because if we accept that words alone aren't enough, the body language is kind of the natural starting line. The source material refers to this as nonverbal burble.
I love that phrase so much, nonverbal burble.
It perfectly describes this chaotic underlying current of communication that's constantly flowing beneath the actual vocabulary.
Yeah, we are talking about eye contact, the volume of your voice, your conversational pacing, your posture.
All of it. And the fatal trap is assuming that these nonverbal cues mean the exact same thing to everyone in the room.
They absolutely do not. And when we look at how nonverbal communication varies across cultures, we often frame it through the lens of, well, high context versus low context cultures.
Right.
This is a concept originally developed by anthropologist Edward T. Hall, and it's just vital for understanding why a single misstep can completely sabotage your pitch.
Let's break that down, actually, because I feel like high context and low context get thrown around a lot in, business seminars, but the actual mechanics of how they operate are rarely explained.
That's very true.
So let's look at eye contact. If I'm in the US and I'm pitching you an idea, I am going to look you dead in the eye. To my American brain, that unwavering eye contact proves I have nothing to hide. It shows respect, confidence, transparency.
Precisely. In low-context cultures like the United States, meaning is primarily derived from explicit verbal communication. But the supporting nonverbal cue, the eye contact, is tethered directly to trustworthiness.
Yeah, we literally have phrases like, look me in the eye and say that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you take that exact same behavior, right, that intense, unwavering confidence, and apply it when selling to a decision maker from a high-context Asian culture, the neurological and cultural response is just drastically different.
The text points out that prolonged eye contact in that setting can signal deep disrespect.
It signals disrespect, intrusiveness, and fundamental lack of understanding of social hierarchy.
Wow.
Yeah, in many Asian cultures, lowering the eyes is a sign of deference and respect for authority. The culture prioritizes group harmony and subtle, unspoken understandings, and that is what makes it high context.
So if you are a sales rep aggressively maintaining eye contact with, say, a senior executive in Tokyo or Seoul, you are not projecting confidence at all.
No, you are projecting a shocking lack of manners. You are essentially challenging their authority without opening your mouth.
It's like you are physically asserting dominance, and they're just reacting to the aggression, completely tuning out whatever brilliant metric you're quoting from your script.
Exactly. The script is dead on arrival because the nonverbal verbal is basically screaming, I don't respect your position.
That is wild. And the variation in volume and emotion is another massive stumbling block the authors highlight. Like, if I am really excited about a new software feature, my voice naturally rises.
Oh, sure.
I start speaking faster, my hands are moving everywhere, I'm leaning across the table. I am basically performing my passion to prove to you how amazing this product is.
And again, we have to look at the why behind that. In highly individualistic, low-context cultures, we're taught that to stand out, you have to be dynamic.
Right.
You have to broadcast your internal state outward for people to believe you.
Right. But to an Asian decision maker or someone from a culture that heavily prioritizes emotional regulation, that rising volume doesn't read as passion at all, does it?
Not even a little. It reads as a lack of self-control.
Oof.
Yeah. In many high-context cultures, harmony and restraint are the bedrock of professional interaction. Emotion is supposed to be managed, not broadcasted to the whole room.
So when an enthusiastic American salesperson gets loud and highly animated, the prospect isn't feeling their passion, they are feeling alarm.
Yes, alarm. They are likely thinking, if this person cannot even regulate their own volume and physical space in just a standard introductory meeting, how on earth can I trust them to handle a multi-million-dollar account when things actually get stressful?
That makes so much sense. You are literally sinking your own ship by trying to show how much you care. You're trying to build trust, but the biological and cultural mechanism you are using is actively destroying it.
Which brings us to the actual flow of the conversation itself. The text specifically examines interruptions in conversational pacing.
This one is fascinating to me because it is so deeply ingrained in how our brains process language in real time. The text notes that in many Asian cultures, interrupting is viewed as an egregious offense.
Completely unacceptable, yeah.
You are expected to wait for the person to finish their thought, and often you leave a literal beat of silence before you even begin speaking.
And that silence isn't dead air, right? It is active communication. It is a nonverbal way of saying, I have truly absorbed the weight of what you just said.
I love that.
But then we look at a completely different cultural dynamic. Let's take many European, Middle Eastern, and some Latin American cultures.
Where overlapping speech is just totally normal.
Linguists sometimes call this cooperative overlapping. It is a sign of a highly engaged, collaborative conversation.
Right, like if you're not jumping in, if you aren't finishing sentences or interjecting with agreement, the other person might assume you're bored or that you just don't care about what they were saying.
Exactly. So imagine the nightmare scenario here. An American salesperson who is used to a moderate level of back and forth is pitching a prospect from the Middle East.
Okay.
The American might feel like they're constantly being cut off, so they start getting defensive and they completely lose their flow.
Oh, man, yeah.
But if that same American is pitching a prospect from Japan, the American might be the one doing the cutting off, thinking they are just being dynamic and engaged, while the Japanese client is sitting there silently horrified.
It's a perfect storm of miscommunication.
It really is. You are using the exact same script in both rooms, but the nonverbal execution is entirely out of phase with the buyer's cultural expectations.
You are pressing all the right buttons on the controller, but you are playing completely the wrong game.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, the authors advise mirroring the client's behavior to adapt to their preferred pattern. But wait, how do you actually execute that without looking completely unhinged?
What do you mean?
Well, if my prospect leans on their left elbow and rubs their chin, and I immediately lean on my left elbow and rub my chin, they are going to notice. It feels manipulative.
Okay. That is a critical distinction that has to be made because there is a vast psychological difference between mimicking and mirroring.
Okay, mimicking versus mirroring.
Mimicking is copying exact physical gestures. That is what you just described. And it triggers the uncanny valley effect in the human brain.
Right, it feels creepy.
Very creepy. We are highly evolved to detect when someone is artificially mocking or copying us, and it instantly destroys trust.
So what is the actual mechanism of mirroring then? How do we use it correctly?
Mirroring is about matching the energy, the pacing, and the volume of the interaction. It is deeply rooted in our biology.
Mm.
We have mirror neurons in our brains that naturally want to synchronize with the people around us to build rapport.
So it's more about the vibe than the specific posture.
Exactly. You calibrate your baseline to theirs. If they speak softly and deliberately, you don't copy their exact words, but you lower your volume and slow your cadence. Got it.
If they take a relaxed, contemplative posture, you don't crowd the table and lean into their face. You give them physical space. You are mirroring the environment they are trying to create.
That is so actionable. So if you're listening to this and wondering how to practically apply this before you walk into your next pitch, the takeaway here is to implement a strict 2-minute observation period.
Yes, the 2-minute rule. For the first 2 minutes of the interaction, your primary job is to observe, not to pitch.
What are we looking for in those 2 minutes?
Everything we just talked about. How fast are they talking? How loud are they? Do they leave gaps of silence? Let them set the atmospheric baseline and then deliberately calibrate your delivery to match that baseline before you ever start talking about your product.
That 2-minute rule is a massive paradigm shift. Just pause, listen, and watch the room.
It changes everything.
But, this naturally leads to a much deeper problem. Yeah. What happens if you fix your body language? You calibrate your volume perfectly, but you walk into the room with a fundamentally biased mental map. That's where things get really dangerous.
Right, because you can have perfect pacing, but if your internal framework is clouded by bias, the buyer will eventually sense that you don't actually see them. You only see a category.
And this is where the internal psychological work of sales begins. The nonverbal verbal is just the surface. The mental shortcuts we use are the foundation.
Yeah, and the authors ground this in some very stark demographics. They point out that the United States is the most demographically diverse country in the world.
It's incredible.
At the time of publication, they noted that approximately 32 million people, which is about 12% of the U.S. population, were born in another country.
And when you are faced with that level of massive diversity and unfamiliarity, the human brain faces a biological problem. Cognitive overload.
Because there's just too much information to process.
Exactly. Our brains are incredibly energy-intensive organs, and they are essentially lazy. They want to conserve energy whenever possible.
So the brain uses heuristics.
Yes. It uses heuristics, or mental shortcuts, to handle uncertainty. When we encounter individuals we don't know well, the brain automatically tries to place them into distinct groups or categories based on past experiences, media consumption, or cultural narratives.
Just to save processing power.
Right. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism to quickly assess if someone is friend or foe, but in a modern boardroom, it is a massive liability.
The text makes a very specific distinction here between stereotypes and prejudice, which I think is important to clarify because we tend to use those words interchangeably a lot.
They are related, but functionally different. Stereotypes are the cognitive shortcuts. They're the mental images we carry around that function as a quick guide to perceiving others.
They're the map.
Exactly. They are a way to process a complex world quickly. Assuming an accountant is going to be quiet and detail-oriented is a stereotype.
Okay, so what's prejudice then?
Prejudice, on the other hand, is the emotional prejudgment. It is a positive or negative feeling about a group of people that is rooted in something much deeper than just a shortcut.
Like an us versus them thing.
Precisely. It often arises from an in-group versus out-group dynamic. We want to elevate our own group, or we feel another group presents a threat to our status.
Right.
Prejudice leads to inherently negative expectations. As the text points out, prejudice usually stops salespeople from even making calls on targets who belong to that specific demographic.
So stereotypes are using an outdated map, and prejudice is deciding you hate the destination before you even get in the car.
That is a perfect analogy.
But the authors warn that even so-called harmless stereotyping is a massive trap in sales. They give a really brilliant example regarding East Indians to illustrate this.
It perfectly illustrates the flaw of relying on heritage as a sole predictor of behavior.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
The authors ask us to consider two individuals of East Indian descent. One was raised entirely in the U.S., attended U.S. universities, and has spent their entire career fully immersed in U.S. corporate culture.
Okay.
The other was raised in India, built their career there, and remains deeply rooted in their home culture's business practices.
So let's say you walk into a room with the executive raised in the U.S. If you see their heritage and immediately start deploying tactics designed for a highly collectivistic, high-context Indian business culture.
Like being overly deferential, avoiding direct eye contact.
Right, or spending 20 minutes on small talk before getting to the point, you are going to entirely alienate them. Because neurologically and socially, they might be a fast-paced, cut-to-the-chase, low-context American business person who just happens to have East Indian heritage.
Exactly. The neuroplasticity of the human brain allows us to adapt to our lived environments. Their cultural software is American corporate, even if their hardware, so to speak, reflects their heritage.
And the reverse is equally true, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you treat the executive raised in India with aggressive, task-focused, American-style tactics simply because you happen to be sitting in a boardroom in New York, you will destroy any chance of a relationship.
You're just ignoring reality.
Assuming they make decisions exactly the same way based purely on heritage shows the prospect that you are not paying attention to them as an individual.
Think of it like using a GPS loaded with a map from 1995.
Oh, that's good.
You think you know exactly where you're going. The shortcut makes total sense on your screen.
Right.
But the landscape has changed. Decades of new roads have been built. Neighborhoods have shifted.
Right.
If you blindly follow that outdated shortcut without looking out the windshield at the actual road in front of you, you are going to drive your car straight into a lake.
The map is not the territory. In sales, the stereotype is never the actual prospect.
Well, wait, let's look at the friction here, because I can hear some people pushing back on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Aren't stereotypes sometimes formed because of recognizable patterns? Like, if a sales rep notices that 80% of their clients from a certain background prefer a specific communication style, isn't it just biologically efficient to start with that assumption?
It is biologically efficient, yes.
So how do we realistically ask people to unlearn these mental shortcuts when our brains are literally wired by evolution to look for them?
That is the core struggle of adaptive selling. To overcome that biological wiring, we have to look at a psychological concept known as tolerance for ambiguity.
Tolerance for ambiguity. How does that practically apply to a sales pitch?
Think about the fundamental nature of sales. It is inherently deeply ambiguous.
Always.
You walk into a room and you do not know for certain what the prospect is thinking. You don't know their real budget, you don't know the internal office politics they are navigating, and you don't know what hidden objections they are harboring.
And that level of uncertainty triggers the amygdala.
It causes immense fear and anxiety.
Especially when your commission and your livelihood are on the line, you're sitting there sweating, wondering if you're going to make rent.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Poor salespeople, or highly anxious salespeople, are terrified of this ambiguity. The cognitive dissonance is just too much for them. So they grasp at anything that gives them a false sense of certainty.
Which is where the stereotypes come in.
Yes.
Huh.
They rely on racial profiling or ethnic shortcuts because it artificially reduces the ambiguity.
It's like a security blanket.
It gives them a script. It makes them feel like they are in control of an uncontrollable situation. Good salespeople, however, have cultivated a high tolerance for ambiguity.
They're okay with the discomfort.
Exactly. They do not need to force the prospect into a neat little box before they start talking. Because they can handle the discomfort of not knowing, they stay curious.
Right.
They ask genuine questions. They discover who the person actually is rather than who the stereotype says they should be.
That is profound. The stereotype isn't just a sign of bias. It is a symptom of fear. It is a psychological crutch for a professional who cannot handle the unknown.
That's exactly what it is.
So how does a professional actually build that tolerance? The authors lay out a very specific 3-step protocol to train the skill, right?
It is a continuous training process, yeah. Step 1. Refrain from formulating expectations based solely on your own culture.
Which is harder than it sounds.
Much harder. You have to consciously remind yourself that your version of normal is not universal. It is just the water you swim in.
You have to check your cultural ego at the door. And step 2.
Step 2 is behavioral. Refuse to isolate your selling experiences to members of your own demographic.
So you have to actively seek out uncomfortable situations.
You have to deliberately push yourself out of your comfort zone. If you only sell to people who look, sound, and think like you, your tolerance for ambiguity will atrophy.
It's like a muscle.
Yes. You have to expose yourself to the friction of the diverse market to get comfortable with it.
And step 3 is an ongoing commitment.
Step 3 is to actively eliminate personal biases by committing to multicultural skills. The authors are framing this not as a moral imperative, but as a hard business skill.
Right. It's about the bottom line.
You have to read, ask questions, and study human behavior with the exact same rigor you apply to studying your product specifications or your financial models.
Wow. Okay, so if you can conquer your physical delivery and you can train your brain to abandon its lazy cultural shortcuts, you are ready for the next demographic hurdle.
And this one is huge.
Because even if you master culture and race, there is a demographic clock ticking in that room that entirely changes how trust is built. We are talking about the generational divide. Age matters just as much as culture.
The demographic reality of age is shifting the entire global marketplace as we speak.
Yeah, give us the numbers.
The text points out a staggering statistic. Today, there are more people over the age of 65 than there are under the age of 18.
That is insane to think about.
Some demographers refer to this as the silver tsunami. It is fundamentally reshaping where the capital is held and how it is deployed globally.
And yet, if you look at modern sales and marketing, there is this relentless, almost pathological obsession with youth.
Which is a massive strategic error. If you are ignoring the over 65 demographic, or if you are stubbornly treating them with the exact same sales playbook you use for a 25-year-old tech founder, you are failing to adapt to the largest pool of capital in the market.
The authors highlight that people born decades apart are essentially running on different operating systems.
They really are. They have lived through entirely different historical eras.
Different economic booms, different recessions, different geopolitical crises. All of that history permanently wires how they view risk, how they value money, and, how they grant trust.
Specifically, the text notes a clear behavioral trend. Older clients are generally far less receptive to cold calling strangers.
Why is that, though? Is it just a discomfort with modern technology? Like, they don't like getting emails?
No, it is much deeper than technology. It is about the architecture of trust. Younger generations have grown up entirely within an era of frictionless digital transactions.
Right. I click a button on a screen, and a stranger drives me to the airport.
You click another button, and a stranger delivers your groceries. There is a baseline cultural acceptance of transacting with unknowns rapidly.
I'm not even think about it.
But older generations built their careers and their lives on a relationship-first model. They remember a time when transacting required human intervention, physical paperwork, and looking someone in the eye at a bank branch.
Yeah, my grandpa used to go to the same bank teller for 30 years.
Exactly. They want to know who they are doing business with before they care about what the business is. Therefore, when you are selling to older clients, the rapid, undeniable establishment of personal credibility is paramount.
The text also dives into how different cultures globally view the concept of youth versus age, and it highlights how the U.S. is a massive outlier here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The U.S. has this deep-seated worship of youth and innovation, which inevitably breeds age prejudice. We just assume older means slower or obsolete.
But globally, age is deeply revered.
In many countries, particularly those that emphasize status differences and historical continuity, age is synonymous with wisdom. It is a distinct, tangible benefit.
The authors include several proverbs from around the world that perfectly encapsulate this reverence for age, and conversely, a very healthy skepticism of youth.
These proverbs are incredible.
Let's look at a few, because they really drive the point home. From Hungary, the eggshell is still on your butt.
Meaning, you have just hatched. You haven't survived long enough to know anything of value.
That is hilarious. Okay, from Korea, there is blood on your head and it is not dried off yet.
That is a visceral way of saying you are freshly born into this world. You lack the scars of actual experience.
It's intense. And from China, he who has no hair on his lip can't be trusted to do anything well.
Right.
And from Spain, youth is an illness that time cures. Oh, wow, that is brutal.
It is brutal, but it perfectly summarizes a worldview where getting older is not a decline, it is a cure. It is an accumulation of value.
So consider the dynamic when a 25-year-old sales rep walks in to pitch a 65-year-old executive who holds these cultural values.
It's an uphill battle. The young rep is starting at a massive credibility deficit simply by virtue of their youth.
And this is where the sales rep often misinterprets the situation, because the older buyer takes their time, asks highly detailed questions, and requires more information before committing. An impatient sales rep might slip into ageism.
And ageism in sales is incredibly common and instantly destructive. It usually manifests as patronizing behavior.
Like what?
Well, the salesperson observes the older client moving slowly or showing caution, and they incorrectly attribute that to cognitive decline or an inability to understand the modern product.
So what do? They start speaking a little louder. They
Yes,
oversimplify the concepts. They start acting like a protective parent trying to guide a child across the street.
which the client immediately senses, and they feel deeply disrespected. The skepticism of an older buyer isn't them being slow.
Right.
That skepticism is hard-earned wisdom. They have lived through enough economic cycles, enough failed promises, and enough slick salespeople to know that caution is survival.
Yeah, they are perfectly comfortable saying, I don't know, or let me think about it.
Exactly.
I think of this generational gap like trying to use a Gen Z marketing tactic like high pressure FOMO, fear of missing out on a boomer mindset.
Doesn't work.
It's like trying to run modern software on a legacy mainframe without an adapter. It will just crash. A 70-year-old has lived through enough decades to know that if they miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime deal, another one will invariably come along next week.
Manufactured urgency completely bounces off of them.
But here is the critical challenge for the salesperson. The text warns against being patronizing. But how do you actually walk that line?
It's tricky.
How do you respect their need for more foundational information without accidentally treating them like a child? How do you provide basic data without sounding condescending?
It comes down to framing. You don't deliver the information as if you are teaching a child how to tie their shoes. You deliver it as if you are presenting evidence to a judge in a courtroom.
Oh, I love that. A judge.
That is a perfect framework. A judge isn't slow. A judge is thorough. A judge demands to see all the exhibits, understand the precedents, and weigh all the risks before they make a ruling.
When you are selling to an older demographic, you frame your comprehensive data not as a simplification because they don't get it, but as a deep dive for a discerning mind.
Yes.
You say, because I know you appreciate the finer details of implementation, I've prepared a complete breakdown of the risk metrics over a 5-year timeline. That is deeply respectful.
So if you are taking notes, your practical application here is to explicitly alter your pacing. When selling to an older demographic, slow the entire process down.
Right, take a breath.
Prioritize building relational trust over rushing the close. Abandon those artificial deadlines. Instead, proactively provide comprehensive case studies, data sheets, and guarantees to soothe that natural skepticism.
You must make them feel secure, not rushed.
Absolutely.
All right, we have navigated the unspoken script of nonverbal behavior, we have dismantled the mental traps of cultural stereotyping, and we have bridged the generational gap.
We've covered a lot.
But there is one final demographic pillar explored in this chapter that fundamentally dictates how humans interact. We have to talk about the gender divide. Because once you understand culture and age, you really must understand how gender socialization impacts decision-making.
This is perhaps one of the most delicate yet undeniably crucial areas of adaptive selling. The authors make a very clear evidence-based case that men and women, generally speaking, are socialized differently from a very young age.
Regarding how they communicate, how they view risk, and how they make purchases.
Right. And we need to clarify right out of the gate that the authors are not talking about biological determinism.
Yes, that's an important caveat.
They are talking about sociological trends based on how society has historically trained people through childhood play, educational reinforcement, and corporate expectations.
Exactly. This is about socialization. And the text points out a very real, very frustrating double standard that still permeates the business world regarding these socialized speech patterns.
They explicitly warn against the societal penalties associated with crossing these invisible lines.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For instance, if a female sales representative uses highly masculine, assertive, direct speech, which, by the way, is exactly what the traditional sales manuals tell you to do.
Right, always be closing, assert dominance, all that.
Exactly. But if she does that, she is often unfairly penalized by the prospect. She is labeled as arrogant or aggressive.
It's so unfair.
It is. The prospect experiences cognitive dissonance because she is violating the socialized expectation of how a woman should communicate, and they react with hostility.
But if a man delivers the exact same script with the exact same assertive tone, he is praised for taking charge.
Completely.
Yeah.
And conversely, if a male sales representative utilizes feminine, highly emotional, relationship-focused speech, perhaps he's just trying to build deep rapport, he is often penalized by the prospect as being wimpy or lacking authority.
It is a deeply ingrained sociological double standard that you just have to be aware of to survive in the room.
It's completely unfair, but it is the reality of the boardrooms we walk into.
So we need to break down these socialized operating systems so we can actually adapt to them. What does male socialization typically look like in a corporate sales environment?
The sociological literature suggests that male socialization encourages direct, assertive communication. It is highly focused on immediate problem solving and status enhancement.
Status enhancement, that's key.
Men are often trained from childhood. Think of the hierarchical nature of traditional boys' games to view interactions as a ladder to be climbed, a hierarchy to be navigated, or just a puzzle to be solved as quickly as possible.
And the text points out something fascinating about how men listen, which drives salespeople crazy. They give minimal response cues.
Oh, yes. The minimal response cues. A male prospect might sit there with a totally stoic face, maybe giving a slight nod or a non-committal grunt.
Just staring you down.
Stoicism is a socialized marker of status. They are not offering a lot of verbal feedback like, oh, I see, or that is a great point.
Which makes them incredibly hard to read. You're pouring your heart into a pitch, you are waiting for some kind of validation, and they're just staring at you like a statue.
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking.
You think you are completely bombing the meeting, but in their mind, they might actually be totally sold and ready to buy.
Precisely. Now contrast that with female socialization.
Mm.
Generally, women are socialized to be highly relationship-focused. Their communication tends to be more emotionally responsive and inclusive.
Right.
They use talk not just to transfer data, but to create a bond and ensure group cohesion.
They are the ones giving you the active feedback. They are nodding, smiling, asking clarifying questions, making sure everyone at the table feels heard.
Yes, but there is also a critical difference in how risk is perceived.
Okay, how so?
The text notes that women, again due to sociological trends and often being held to much higher standards of accountability in the workplace, tend to be more risk-averse in purchasing decisions.
That makes sense if the penalty for failure is higher.
Exactly. They require more comprehensive information to reduce ambiguity and ensure that the decision will not harm the relationship, the budget, or the team.
I think of this like tuning into two different radio frequencies.
I like where this is going.
Male socialization is like AM radio. It is talk radio, it is direct data, it is getting straight to the point, solving the immediate problem, and enhancing status.
Okay, yeah.
Female socialization is like FM radio. It is higher fidelity. It involves relational storytelling, picking up on all the nuances of the environment, and reducing risk for the entire group. As a salesperson, you have to know which dial to turn.
That is a brilliant analogy. AM for direct data and status. FM for relationships, consensus, and risk reduction.
But hold on a second, because as we talk about this, everything we just laid out sounds dangerously close to the exact stereotyping we were criticizing 10 minutes ago.
Right, it can feel that way.
Are we seriously supposed to walk into a room and assume all men are stoic AM radio robots and all women just want to sit around and bond on FM? How is that not just boxing our clients into outdated 1950s gender profiling?
That is the exact tension at the heart of adaptive selling, and it requires a highly sophisticated approach. We have to navigate the line between understanding broad sociological trends and respecting individual uniqueness.
Because if I assume the female CEO wants to talk about her team's feelings and she actually just wants the bottom line metrics, I am going to lose her instantly.
Exactly. The goal of understanding these trends is not to stereotype. The goal is to have a fully equipped toolkit and be prepared to deploy the right tool.
It's about preparedness, not assumption.
It is about using inclusive language and having flexible hypotheses.
So it's about observation.
Yes. This ties all the way back to the 2-minute rule we discussed at the very beginning. You let them speak first. You pay intense attention to their opening conversational volley.
What are we listening for in that opening volley?
You are listening for their chosen frequency. When they first start talking, what do they focus on?
Like, what words are they using?
Right. If they immediately focus on the team, the relationships, and the intricate details of how this implementation will affect their staff, you need to match that FM frequency.
Regardless of whether they are a man or a woman.
Exactly. Regardless of gender, you need to supply risk-reducing data and use inclusive, we-focused language.
But if their opening volley is brief, direct, and entirely focused on the bottom line, or how this product will help them beat their main competitor, you pivot.
You pivot to AM. You give them direct, problem-solving assertiveness and status-enhancing metrics. You adapt to the gendered socialization they're displaying in that moment.
You are not judging them based on their appearance. You are mirroring their chosen communication style.
Exactly.
Adapt to the socialization they are displaying. That is the master key to this entire section.
It really is.
We have covered an immense amount of psychological ground today. We started with the unspoken script of nonverbal verbal and how eye contact and volume can betray you.
We navigated the neurological minefields of cultural stereotyping and learned why a high tolerance for ambiguity is essential.
We bridged the generational gap by understanding how different historical cohorts grant trust, and we tuned in to the different frequencies of gender socialization.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So if we take everything from pages 14 to 17 of this chapter, how do we pull this into one singular, actionable philosophy for you, the listener, as you head into your next meeting?
If we synthesize all of these concepts, it culminates in what we can call the borderless mindset.
The borderless mindset. Explain what that means in practice.
The soul of this chapter is the realization that the best, most meticulously crafted sales script in the world is utterly useless if you do not recognize that borders are not just geographical lines on a map.
Right.
Borders are generational, borders are cultural, borders are gendered.
The authors state it perfectly in the text. They say, sales borders exist in your mind only. In reality, the world of selling is borderless.
That is the ultimate insight. True persuasion is never about forcing someone to understand your script. It is never about demanding they adapt to your communication style.
Because that's arrogant.
Exactly. True persuasion is about intense, empathetic observation and relentless adaptability. It is about actively crossing the borders in your own mind to meet the prospect where they actually live.
It all comes back to that terrifying thought we opened with. If you are just reciting a script like an actor hitting marks, you might be insulting your prospect before you even finish your first sentence, simply because you failed to observe them.
You failed to read the human being sitting across from you.
The script is just the ink on the page. Your empathy, your observation, and your adaptability, that is the actual performance. That is what closes the deal.
Beautifully said.
Now that you have mastered the psychology of how to read the person sitting across the table, how do you actually get them to sit at the table in the first place?
Ah, that's the real trick.
Next time on the deep dive, we are going to explore the specific, high-stakes opening scripts that turn cold prospects into eager listeners. We will look at exactly how to break through the initial resistance. You won't want to miss it.
It's going to be a great one.
Until then, remember, the script only works if you understand the person hearing it. Pay attention to the verbal, stay curious in the ambiguity, and we'll catch you on the next one. So what if the biggest barrier to your next major business breakthrough isn't your product or, your market, but literally the way you fold your hands and the way you write your email subject lines?
Right, yeah, it sounds wild when you put it like that.
It does, right. But, we live in this fascinating era where global borders have they've effectively vanished. We can instantly reach anyone, anywhere on the planet with a click. But in the process of tearing down those physical geographic borders, we've sort of erected entirely new, invisible digital ones.
Exactly, yeah. We are trying to sell and communicate to a generation of people who are just staring at screens all day, completely absorbed in their own customized, hyper-curated little worlds.
Yeah, and to actually break through that kind of noise, we have to completely rethink the digital tools we use every single day. And maybe even more importantly, we have to rethink our own internal psychology. So today's deep dive is really about bridging that massive gap, right? The gap between external communication and internal mindset.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing today. In a couple of sentences, we're basically exploring this huge transition from a borderless global market to the hyper-individualized digital space of what researchers call Generation Me.
Generation Me, yeah.
Right. And you're going to learn how to actually master modern tech tools like email and blogs to cut through the noise rather than just adding to it. And then we're going to flip the lens inward to diagnose and basically cure the 3 silent diseases that kill professional motivation and success. Because surviving in modern business, it requires not just tech-savvy tactics, but a really resilient, actively managed mindset.
Totally. So let's start with this whole concept of the borderless world. The traditional idea of expanding a business, it used to mean, getting on a plane, crossing an ocean, setting up a physical shop somewhere.
Right. The logistics were a nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. But the premise we are working from now in this deep dive is that sales borders exist in your mind only. The world is truly borderless in a logistical sense today, but the new context for pitching, or basically any business interaction, is this technological revolution driven by Generation Me.
Yeah, the post-1970 cohort.
Yeah.
And understanding that specific demographic shift is basically the key to unlocking modern communication.
Because they grew up with a totally different relationship to media, right?
Completely different. Generation Me grew up with a relationship to technology that no generation before them ever experienced. They are they're natural media multitaskers. They are seamlessly transitioning between, instant messaging, texting, mobile devices, podcasts, video platforms.
Just constantly plugged in.
Exactly. But the defining characteristic isn't the hardware they are using. It's not about the phone itself. It's the psychology behind how they interact with the information on the phone.
Right. They expect others to be as thrilled with them as they are with themselves. Which is, that is a heavy psychological baseline to work from when you're trying to sell something.
It's massive. They don't want mass media anymore. They want iMedia or my media. They desire what is essentially the daily me.
The daily me, yeah. Let's unpack why that shift is so profound. Because it's not just about ego, is it?
No, not at all. It's actually about control. Consider the evolution of how we consume information. Like 50 years ago, you had, 3 television channels and a local newspaper?
Right. Everyone watched the exact same broadcast at the exact same time.
Exactly. The power dynamic was entirely top-down.
Yep.
The broadcaster spoke and the audience just listened. But Generation Me has completely inverted that dynamic. It's a profound shift in control. They are accustomed to curating their entire existence.
They pick and choose every single thing.
Right. They choose the specific voices they want to hear, the exact aesthetics they want to look at, the precise communities they want to engage with. They have built an impenetrable, customized bubble.
Which perfectly explains why traditional broadcast pitching, where you just blast your generic message at an audience, fails so spectacularly now.
It fails completely. Because it's not just ineffective, it's actually perceived as an invasive threat.
Yeah, trying to communicate with using old school mass marketing, I think of it like trying to DJ a party where every single guest is wearing their own noise-canceling headphones.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, and they are all listening to their own customized Spotify playlist. You can turn your speakers up as loud as you want, but they literally cannot hear you.
And if you just turn the volume up louder to try and force them to hear you, you aren't penetrating their world, You are just becoming an annoyance that they actively try to block.
You're just distortion at that point.
Exactly. When someone has spent years building this highly personalized media environment, an uninvited sales pitch is an interruption to their curated reality. It literally disrupts the narrative they have built for themselves.
Okay, but if they want the entire experience to be about them, does that mean our outreach needs to constantly stroke their egos? Like, are we supposed to just shower them with compliments to get their attention? Or do we just need to get out of the way and basically hand them the O cord?
You hand them the O cord, 100%. Stroking their ego might get you a momentary glance, sure, but it doesn't create any real engagement. The core objective here is to transition the prospect from being a passive receiver of information into an active creator of content.
Ah, okay. So making them part of the process.
Yes, you have to hand them back the control they feel entitled to. Instead of talking at them, you design your communication to solicit their input immediately.
That requires a total restructuring of the pitch then. Because you aren't presenting a finished puzzle, you are handing them a few edge pieces and asking them to help you build the rest of it.
Right. You ask for their perspective, their feedback, or what their specific challenge is right out of the gate.
Which brings us to the actual operational challenge, because to hand them the O cord, you have to actually reach them first.
You have to get the invitation into the bubble.
Right. And the most ubiquitous tool we use for that email is almost universally deployed in a way that just guarantees it's going to be ignored.
Oh, it's terrible. Email is the digital gatekeeper, but the first thing we have to unlearn is what email is actually for. Because it is not a replacement for a phone call.
Yeah.
And it is certainly not a replacement for face-to-face contact.
It's just a supplement.
It is a supplement. Its primary strategic use is to bypass physical gatekeepers and to keep clients warm, to basically prevent defection. It's a mechanism for maintaining a presence, not for closing some complex deal.
Think about the psychology of the inbox for a second. If you're listening to this, think about when you open your email in the morning. You are not looking for new opportunities.
No, you're performing triage.
Exactly. You are looking at a list of demands on your time, and your brain is actively searching for any excuse to hit the delete button. You scan the first few words, just to determine if an email is a threat to your productivity today.
Which means the battle is literally won or lost in the subject line. You have to create a must-open mindset. And the two non-negotiable rules for a subject line are: do not include your company name and use an active verb while referencing a specific problem you can actually solve.
The company name thing is so interesting. Why is that such a deal breaker?
Because the moment a recipient sees a company name in a subject line, their brain immediately categorizes it as a broadcast pitch. It signals that this message is about the sender, not the receiver.
Right. It's about you, not me.
Exactly. Remember the daily me. A company name belongs to the daily you. By removing the company name and focusing on a verb and a problem, you align the subject line with their self-interest. Like, reduce your monthly overhead by 15% is a problem they actually care about, but update from XYZ Solutions.
That's just an interruption.
Exactly. It gets deleted.
Okay, so let's trace what happens when they actually click open. Let's say you have successfully bypassed that subject line filter. Now you have the body of the email. You have to front load the message, right?
Yes, front load everything.
You cannot bury the lead in the third paragraph after asking about the weather and, hoping they had a great weekend.
No one cares if you hope they had a good weekend. You reveal the main idea immediately. The goal here is to become what the source material calls the unstranger.
The unstranger. I like that. What does that actually mean in practice?
Being the unstranger means treating the email as a digital handshake, not a marriage proposal. You establish rapport quickly, you state your purpose clearly, and most importantly, you respect their time.
Which requires flawless execution, right? Because typos, poor formatting, dense blocks of text, that all creates cognitive friction.
So much friction. The reader's brain interprets a giant wall of text as a heavy workload, and they will just abandon it. You need plenty of white space, you need standard professional fonts, and absolutely no all-cap ES.
Oh man, all cap yes just reads as aggressive shouting.
It does. It feels like you're being yelled at through the screen.
And the language rules go even deeper than formatting. We have to strip out that corporate shorthand that we all just use without thinking. Things like FYI or ASAP have to completely go.
Yeah, let's consider the actual impact of an abbreviation like ASAP. It stands for as soon as possible. But what does that actually mean in a real business context?
It's completely subjective. Like, does ASAP mean drop everything and do this in the next 5 minutes? Does it mean by the end of the day? Or does it just mean, whenever you have a free moment sometime this week?
And that ambiguity is exactly why it backfires so badly. It creates artificial pressure without providing any operational clarity. It just spikes the recipient's anxiety because they don't know the parameters of the demand.
Right. I always think using ASAP in an email is just like honking your car horn in a traffic jam.
That is a perfect analogy.
Because it doesn't magically make the cars in front of you move any faster. It just spikes everybody's blood pressure, adds to the noise, and makes everyone around you super resentful.
Yeah, a pressure-free email is a productive email. You want to remove all the anxiety from the interaction. If you need something by Friday at noon, just say Friday at noon. Give them the parameters so they can manage their own time.
Giving them back the control, handing over the O cord again.
Exactly. And this leads directly to how you close the email, because it should always end with a single call to action.
Not a laundry list of next steps.
No, just one single action designed to spark a dialogue, not close a deal.
Because if you ask a prospect to, review an attached PDF and cross-reference it with their Q3 budget and then let you know their availability for a 30-minute call next week, you have just given them 3 separate tasks.
Right. And their brain registers this as a massive cognitive load. So what's the easiest response?
To just ignore the email entirely.
Exactly. A single call to action. Something like, would you like me to send over a 1-page summary? That requires a simple yes or no. It massively lowers the barrier to entry for the conversation.
So for everyone listening right now, the most practical thing you can do today is just go audit your sent folder. Just pull up the last 10 outbound emails you sent to prospects or clients or even internal colleagues. Look at them critically. Are they front-loaded?
Do they use pressure words like ASAP?
Right. Did you ask the recipient to do 4 different things or just one simple, low-friction action?
Yeah.
If you clean that up, your response rate will fundamentally change.
It really will. And look, mastering email allows you to push information effectively, but you also need a mechanism to pull people into your orbit. which is where we look at the art of the blog, or what is essentially the digital water cooler.
Yeah, blogs are fascinating in this context. They are interactive online journals designed to humanize you, promote your expertise implicitly, and address market concerns, but in a very conversational format.
And the tone required for a successful blog is really specific. It requires a great idea just occurred to me kind of tone.
Which feels completely counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
It's meant to feel spontaneous and slightly unpolished. If you are trying to project professional competence, why would you want to seem unpolished?
Because it highlights a massive evolution in how authority is constructed and perceived today. Think about traditional business environments. Professionalism was defined by distance and rigidity.
Right. You wore a suit, you communicated in formal memos, and you absolutely never showed vulnerability.
Exactly. Authority was strictly top-down. But the digital age, dominated by Generation Me, is inherently skeptical of that rigid corporate facade. They perceive highly polished corporate speak as completely inauthentic.
Let me push back on that a little bit, though, because if you are, say, an architect or a high-level financial advisor or a corporate consultant charging top dollar, doesn't a casual, hey, this just occurred to me while walking my dog, tone actively undermine your credibility? How do you balance being respected authority with being approachable?
It's a great question. But the reality is that approachability no longer diminishes authority. Approachability is actually the new prerequisite for authority.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Lowering the drawbridge to the castle doesn't mean you don't know how to defend the castle right. It means you are confident enough to invite people inside. A blog is basically a living document of your thought process.
So readers want authentic insight. They want to see how you synthesize information in real time.
Exactly. When you write like you speak, when you keep your posts short, jazzy, and snazzy, you transition from being this faceless corporate entity into a trusted advisor. You are spoon-feeding them digestible insights rather than misfeeding them dense corporate jargon.
And the checklist for creating this kind of content is actually incredibly straightforward. The source material outlines this really well. Before you publish anything, you have to run it through this specific filter.
First, does the headline clarify exactly what the topic is?
Right. Then, does the lead paragraph immediately reveal who, what, and why the reader should care?
Is the entire piece free of industry jargon that would just alienate an outsider?
And crucially, did you end it with a question to evoke comments?
Yes, ending of the question is so important because it circles right back to our foundational rule for Generation Me. Hand them the L cord. You are providing the platform, sure, but you are inviting them to co-create the value by sharing their opinion in the comments.
You are transforming passive reading into active participation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have the external mechanics completely mapped out now. We know how to navigate the borderless digital landscape. We know how to front-load an email, eliminate pressure words, and use a blog to build authentic authority.
Yeah.
But here is the brutal reality, and this is where the deep dive really pivots. Mastering these digital tools is only half the battle. You can have the sharpest email copy in the world and a brilliant jargon-free blog, but if your internal operating system is corrupted, none of it actually matters.
Not at all.
We have to pivot from the external technology to the internal psychology of success.
Yeah, because the tools are just amplifiers. If what you are amplifying is a corrupted mindset, you are really just going to accelerate your own failure. The foundation of this internal psychology, it begins with a very specific, crystallized definition of success.
And it cannot be a vague concept. You can't just say, I want to be rich or I want to do well. It has to be clearly defined and vividly pictured by the individual.
Right. For one person, success might be a Maserati and tailored suits. For someone else, it might be having a housekeeper so they can just reclaim their weekends.
Or could be buying a new home, or simply being able to take a family vacation without feeling that horrible knot of financial stress in your stomach.
Exactly. That picture, whatever it uniquely is for you, that serves as your necessary fuel. It is the core energy source that literally powers you through rejection, through the tedium of prospecting, and through the inevitable setbacks of any professional endeavor.
And without a crystal clear, emotionally resonant picture of what you are actually working toward, you just run out of fuel. And when an ambitious professional runs out of fuel, they don't just stop moving, they fall victim to 3 specific silent diseases.
And the medical framing of these issues in the source material is so helpful. They aren't framed as just bad days or temporary slumps. They are treated as progressive, degenerative conditions.
Right, which means they get worse over time if left untreated.
Exactly. So the first disease is motivational malnutrition.
Malnutrition, which doesn't happen overnight. You don't starve after missing just one meal.
No, motivational malnutrition is the result of lacking a steady diet of internal and external motivation over a prolonged period of time. Because the environment of business is naturally depleting. You face rejection, you face difficult clients, you face logistical nightmares.
If you're not actively feeding your mind with positive input, your motivation slowly starves to death.
It's the absence of what the research calls PP-positive enthusiastic persistence.
PEEP. I like that. Because you can't rely on your boss or your clients to motivate you. You have to manufacture it yourself every day.
Right. If you are suffering from motivational malnutrition, you just stop bouncing back. A lost deal doesn't just frustrate you for an hour, it drains your will to make the next 10 calls.
Which leads directly into the second disease, which is even more severe. Attitudinal dystrophy.
Yeah, dystrophy is literally the wasting away of an organ or tissue. In this case, it is the loss of belief in your own abilities. Your positive attitude literally atrophies from a sheer lack of use.
You start to feel like your profession is devouring you. You wake up dreading the work. And the primary symptom of attitudinal dystrophy is engaging in what they call excuse selling. You basically become a professional victim.
Oh, excuse selling is rampant.
Yeah.
It's never your fault. The market is too soft, the leads are garbage, the competitors are undercutting prices, even the weather is bad.
Right. Excuse selling is the mind's way of protecting the ego when your belief in your own ability has atrophied. If success is impossible because of external factors, then your failure isn't your fault.
Exactly. It is a protective, but ultimately fatal psychological mechanism.
But the third disease is the one that really caught my attention. Knowledge apathy.
Oh, knowledge apathy is the worst one.
The progression here is just fascinating. Think about it. Everyone starts their career as an eager beginner. You know that you know nothing, so your thirst for knowledge is massive. You read the books, you ask the questions, you shadow the veterans.
You're a sponge.
Right. But over time, as you gain competence, you transition from knowing nothing to believing you know it all.
And that's why knowledge apathy is the silent killer, because it often masquerades as genuine expertise. An arrogant veteran believes they have mastered the game, so they stop studying the board. But the board is constantly changing.
Let me ask you this, though. Is knowledge apathy really more dangerous than a bad attitude? Let's say you have a touch of attitudinal dystrophy. You are grumpy, you complain about the market, but you genuinely know your stuff inside and out. Can't you still grind out a successful career just based on that deep competence?
You would think so, but no. The danger of knowledge apathy is that competence has an expiration date.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Your deep competence is based on the market as it existed 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I mean, we just spent 20 minutes discussing how Generation Me fundamentally altered the mechanics of communication, right?
Right.
If you are an arrogant veteran suffering from knowledge apathy, you'll actively refuse to adapt to that shift. You'll keep sending those broadcast pitches and wondering why your closing rate is plummeting. The axiom always holds true. Give up knowing, and you give up growing. The moment you think you know it all is the very moment the market begins to outpace you.
It's a sobering reality check. If you're listening, think about your own daily habits right now. Which of these three conditions are you allowing to take root? Are you starving your motivation by not feeding it with PD?
Is your attitude atrophying into a constant stream of excuses?
Or have you stopped aggressively learning because you feel like you've already figured out your industry? Identifying the disease is the very first step toward a cure. And the cure, well, it always involves change.
Always. And the fundamental mechanics of change require accepting a really hard truth. You cannot always change your environment, you cannot dictate the behavior of your clients, or the decisions of your management team, or the macroeconomic factors of your industry.
The only variable you have absolute, uncompromising control over is yourself.
Exactly.
But changing yourself is not just a mental exercise. It is physically and psychologically uncomfortable. There's a physiological resistance to breaking old habits. To prove this, there's a brilliant little exercise in the text that you can do right now. And if you are listening to this and you aren't driving, I want you to actually do this with me.
Yeah, this is a great exercise.
Okay, take your hands and fold them together, intertwining your fingers just naturally, the exact way you always do.
Now, look down at your hands and notice which thumb is resting on top.
Okay, got it. Now, unfold your hands, pull them apart. Now, fold them together again, but this time, intentionally force the opposite thumb to be on top. You literally have to shift all your fingers over by one position. Do it right now.
Okay, pay attention to the sensation in your hands and in your brain. How does that feel?
It feels awful. It feels completely unnatural, awkward, and honestly almost broken. My brain is actively telling me that my hands are in the wrong position.
And that physical discomfort, that immediate sense of wrongness, is the exact same friction you experience when you try to change a behavioral habit. Old habits die hard, and new habits require sustained time and intentional effort to take root. When you try to adopt a new communication style, or stop using excuses or implement a new email strategy, it is going to feel exactly as awkward as folding your hands the wrong way.
Mhm.
You have to push through the discomfort of the unfamiliar.
The two specific areas where you must force this uncomfortable change are your outlook and your demeanor. So let's start with outlook, specifically optimism. And we really have to clarify this because optimism gets a bad rap in corporate environments as just being naive or like having happy thoughts.
Yeah, people dismiss it. But optimism is not a personality trait. It is a tactical, measurable mechanism for resilience. It is basically an explanatory style for how you process failure and defeat. And the research on this is definitive, highlighted by a very famous study conducted on elite swimmers.
The swimmer study is incredible. Let's walk through it. Researchers took these elite athletes and deliberately lied to them about their performance.
Right. After a heat, they told the swimmers that their times were significantly slower than they actually were. They essentially manufactured a failure to see how the athletes would react.
And they divided the swimmers based on their explanatory style, right?
Right.
The pessimists and the optimists.
Exactly. When the pessimists were handed this manufactured failure, they completely lacked resilience. Their internal narrative immediately blamed themselves, and they believed that this poor performance was indicative of a permanent decline. They internalized the defeat.
And the result was measurable. When they swam their next heat, their times were objectively slower. The belief in their own failure created a literal self-fulfilling prophecy.
But the optimists processed that exact same negative data completely differently. They viewed the poor time as a temporary setback caused by external circumstances, like maybe the water was cold or they didn't sleep well the night before. They did not allow the failure to infect their belief in their core ability.
And in their next heat, the optimists actually swam faster.
Faster. Because optimism dictates your rebound rate. It is the armor that protects your motivation. Adopting a yes attitude means treating daily wins, no matter how small, as significant victories, and treating daily losses as temporary anomalies. It is a highly strategic choice in how you frame reality.
So that is your internal outlook. The external manifestation of that is your demeanor, which essentially boils down to a concept called the power of nice.
And I know it sounds deceptively simple, perhaps even tried to say be nice, but being genuinely nice is a highly effective, ruthlessly efficient business strategy. And the critical distinction here is that it means being nice to everyone unconditionally.
Right. Not just the decision makers, not just the people who can sign the check, but the gatekeepers, the administrative assistants, the doormen, the waitstaff, everyone.
Everyone. There is a story in the text that perfectly illustrates how this is a learned strategic skill, not just a biological disposition. It's about a former law enforcement officer who transitioned into the business world as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, in his previous career in law enforcement, his daily survival literally required him to be anything but nice. It required hypervigilance, constant suspicion, and often outright intimidation. Empathy was a massive liability on the street.
But when he became an entrepreneur, he realized that suspicion wouldn't close deals, so he actively and deliberately retrained his entire demeanor. He made it his personal mission to remember people's names. He learned about their families, their spouses, their kids' hobbies.
He weaponized empathy. He transformed himself into a highly successful, genuinely nice entrepreneur. He didn't just sit around waiting for a personality transplant. He recognized that being nice was a tactical requirement for his new environment, and he just executed it.
That's exactly it. So if we pull all these threads together from today's deep dive, we arrive at a profound paradox at the heart of modern business.
A paradox.
We are operating in an environment where we absolutely must master highly technical digital tools. We must understand the psychological entitlement of Generation Me. We must engineer our emails to bypass the defense mechanisms of the inbox, and we must curate interactive blogs to build modern authority.
But the paradox is that while the tools are digital, the key to actual conversion remains profoundly human. You do not cut through the noise of a hyper-curated, screen-obsessed world with a slightly better algorithm or more aggressive pitch.
No.
You cut through the digital noise with authentic optimism, a relentless commitment to continuous learning to stave off knowledge apathy, and the radical, intentional practice of treating every single person you interact with genuine care and respect.
The digital borders are real, but they are permeable. If you combine the right external tactics with an uncorrupted, resilient internal mindset, you can navigate from the borderless global market right into the absolute center of your client's most trusted inner circle.
And it all comes down to taking that abstract knowledge and applying it to your very next interaction. So now that you've mastered your internal mindset and learned how to break into the digital inbox, the real test begins when you finally get face to face. Next time, consider this. What if the actual words you use during a presentation are secretly sabotaging your authority? What if replacing just 2 words in your everyday vocabulary could completely shift the power dynamic in the room? Until then, keep your thumbs crossed the uncomfortable way, audit your sent folder, and keep diving deep.
What if the biggest barrier between you and your next big sale isn't your product at all?
Right. Or your price, or even your pitch.
Exactly. What if the real problem is that you are treating your prospect like an audience member when, they fully expect to be the star of the show?
It's a massive mismatch in expectations, and honestly, it is quietly killing deals across every single industry, every single day.
Because we are operating on this totally outdated psychological model of what it actually means to consume information.
We really are. We're using 20th century tactics on 21st century brains.
Right. So today, we are giving you a roadmap for navigating what our source material calls the media revolution. That's media with a capital M and a capital E.
Such a clever way to frame it.
It is. And we are looking specifically at how you can use technology to engage this highly individualized demographic known as Generation Me.
Which is so critical because mastering digital tools like email and blogs, it's not just about, figuring out how to hit send without getting blocked by a spam filter.
Yeah, it's about breaking through gatekeepers, establishing genuine trust, and ultimately converting these passive consumers into active co-creators of your sales process.
And that matters whether you are an entrepreneur scaling a startup, a freelancer pitching clients, or really just anyone fascinated by the psychology of modern communication.
The stakes are incredibly high here. If you approach a modern buyer with an old-school broadcast mindset, all the fancy automation software in the world won't save you.
Oh, absolutely not. You have to understand the actual cognitive landscape of the person staring at the screen.
So to do that, we have to deeply understand the mindset of the people using these tools. The source we are analyzing today introduces that typographical shift. I mentioned spelling media as media.
Capital M, capital E. It's a very deliberate visual cue.
Yeah, it highlights Generation Me, which the text defines as the cohort born after 1970.
And what's crucial about this group is their baseline reality, right? They grew up with computers as their primary conduit to the world.
They are natural media multitaskers. I mean, the source paints this picture of their habits chatting on cell phones, surfing the internet, instant messaging, reading emails on BlackBerries.
BlackBerries.
I know, right? Reading on BlackBerries and listening to podcasts all simultaneously.
We definitely need to contextualize those specific technological references because it's actually incredibly revealing.
Yeah, because obviously BlackBerries are a bit retro now.
Right, but the source material captures the absolute dawn of Web 2.0. When they mention BlackBerries, MySpace, and escaping into virtual worlds like Second Life.
Second Life, man, that takes me back.
Doesn't it? But they are capturing the exact historical moment when the internet shifted from a static library into a personalized ecosystem.
That's a great way to put it, a personalized ecosystem.
Yeah, we look at those platforms now and they seem kind of quaint, but they were the primordial soup for the algorithms that run our lives today.
Exactly. That era established the psychological baseline for every digital interaction we have right now.
The technology evolved into, TikTok and personalized AI, but the psychology was cemented back then.
And a huge part of that psychology, according to the text, is that this generation has massive goals. They yearn for self-fulfillment.
They absolutely pride themselves on their individualism.
But the text also drops this fascinating caveat. It says they're sometimes, quote, sketchy on the execution of those goals.
That phrase, sketchy on execution, is the absolute key to understanding their vulnerability.
Why do you think that is? Why are they sketchy on execution?
Because they are chronically overwhelmed. I mean, they live in a state of continuous partial attention.
Right.
They are highly aspirational, and they desperately want to be recognized as unique individuals, but they are paralyzed by the sheer friction of navigating a world with infinite choices and endless digital noise.
Which perfectly explains why they seek out what media expert Nicholas Negroponte calls the daily me.
Yes, the daily me. It's such a brilliant distillation of modern consumer behavior.
The source highlights this concept, and it basically represents the death of mass media.
Because for decades, we all watched the same 3 television channels, right? We read the same local newspaper.
But this generation completely rejects that. They demand customized, individualized content.
They want to meticulously curate their reality.
Yeah, when the source talks about them plugging into iPods or customizing a MySpace page to shut out the rest of the world, we are talking about a profound psychological need.
A need for a locus of control. The world is chaotic, right? So they curate this digital bubble where they are the absolute center of the universe.
It's a defense mechanism as much as it is a preference.
Exactly. It keeps the chaos out.
Well, I want to stop right there and look at this from the perspective of you, the listener, trying to build a business.
Okay, let's do it.
If I have a great product, my traditional instinct is to find a crowd, stand on a soapbox, and just deliver my pitch.
The old broadcast model.
Right. But if my prospect has built this highly customized, impenetrable digital fortress to keep the chaos out, how on earth do I get in?
Well, if you approach them with a traditional mass-produced sales pitch, you will instantly trigger their defense mechanisms.
They'll just see you as more chaos.
They will perceive you as the very noise they are actively trying to filter out. I mean, a click, a swipe, a delete. It requires zero effort for them to banish you from their reality.
That's terrifying for a salesperson.
It should be. The moment they feel they're being talked at, the moment they sense they are just a passive receiver in your numbers game, they just retreat deeper into that customized bubble.
Hold on. I need to play devil's advocate here for a second because this can easily rub traditional business owners the wrong way.
Sure, I hear that a lot, actually.
Doesn't catering to this me-centric entitlement feel a lot like pandering to narcissism?
It does feel that way.
Right. Like, why should a business bend over backward to make the prospect the center of the universe? Shouldn't a superior product just cut through the noise on its own merit?
It is a completely natural reaction to view this as enabling narcissism. And frankly, at first glance, it really does look like pandering.
It does.
But we have to look deeper at the cognitive environment they are surviving in. In a world of constant aggressive digital bombardment, a traditional one-way pitch isn't just ineffective.
What is it then?
It registers as an actual violation of their autonomy.
A violation of autonomy. Wow, that is a really strong way to frame a sales pitch.
But think about what a hard pitch actually is. It's an interruption. It fundamentally assumes that your timeline is more important than theirs.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
In contrast, handing back control to the prospect, that is the evolution of empathy in business. You are acknowledging their reality.
So by soliciting their input and tailoring the experience entirely to them,
You are showing profound respect for their time and their intelligence. You aren't pandering to an ego. You are removing the friction that triggers those defense mechanisms.
it's the most efficient way to secure engagement.
Exactly. You transition from being an interruption to being a facilitator of their self-expression.
The shift from interruption to facilitation. I think I can really visualize this with an analogy.
Let's hear it.
It's the difference between a traditional radio DJ and an interactive DJ at a private club,
Oh, I like that.
right? Think about a radio DJ. They are locked in a soundproof booth. They have a predetermined playlist. They broadcast it out into the ether, and they just blindly hope that someone, somewhere in traffic, happens to like the song.
That is exactly traditional mass marketing. The radio DJ has zero feedback loop until the ratings come out months later.
But selling to Generation Me is like being the DJ at an exclusive private party. You absolutely cannot just play a pre-recorded set list.
Now, you'd get booed off the stage.
You have to read the room in real time. You're taking live requests. You're mixing their favorite tracks on the fly. Maybe you even pull someone up and hand them the microphone.
Right. The interactive DJ makes the audience feel like they are producing the soundtrack together.
That's the perfect mental model. The radio DJ assumes the value is the music they selected. The interactive DJ understands the value is the experience of co-creation.
The ultimate goal of this psychological shift is to turn your prospect from a passive consumer of your sales collateral into an active creator of the solution.
So the practical application of this is immediate. In your next pitch or even, a simple discovery call, you have to intentionally shatter that broadcast dynamic.
You stop treating the prospect as a passive vessel for your expertise.
Instead, you design your communication to ask a question or present a scenario that forces them to project their own specific needs into your framework.
You ask them to customize the hypothetical solution. You literally hand them the mic.
You give them the locus of control.
And once they feel they are in control, the walls of that digital fortress start to come down.
Which naturally leads us to the mechanical problem. We understand the psychology. We know we are dealing with a highly individualized, multitasking demographic hiding inside a curated bubble.
Right.
But how do we actually reach them to begin that co-creation process? The source text points to one specific foundational tool.
Email.
Good old email.
Yes, but the text places very strict boundaries around what email is actually for. It is crucial to understand that email is a supplement. It is never a replacement for real human contact.
Yeah, the text is very clear that email is not for closing deals. It is not a substitute for the face-to-face meeting or that deep dive phone call.
Its primary function is just to slip under the door of the fortress.
Slipping under the door.
Because it's asynchronous, it breaks through gatekeepers. You bypass administrative assistants, you bypass screening protocols.
Its purpose is really to keep clients, quote-unquote, warm, and to prevent customer defections by establishing omnipresence.
Exactly. You want to remain front and center in their mind without committing the cardinal sin of an uninvited, intrusive phone call.
It's like keeping a pot of sauce simmering on the back burner.
That's a great way to look at it.
You aren't trying to serve the entire 5-course meal through an email thread. You're just using it to maintain the perfect temperature until they're finally ready to sit down at the table with you.
Precisely. You are sparking a dialogue, not demanding a resolution.
But because the modern inbox is an incredibly hostile, high-stress environment, the anatomy of that email must be engineered flawlessly.
The cognitive load of processing an inbox is immense. People are constantly in triage mode.
So the text lays out this always-on email strategy with meticulous rules. Let's look at those rules, starting with the very first thing they see.
The subject line.
Right. The source states we need a compelling subject line that creates a must-open mindset.
But here is the counterintuitive part. It specifically commands us to use no company names.
Which is wild. We are told to use action verbs and reference a specific problem. But why omit the company name? Isn't brand recognition the whole point of marketing?
Brand recognition works for mass media, but remember, we are operating in the daily me.
Okay.
When a prospect scans their inbox, their brain is essentially running a threat detection algorithm.
Threat detection. So a pitch is a threat.
Exactly. A company name and a subject line instantly triggers the sales pitch schema. It screams, "This email is about my quota, not your problem."
It immediately identifies you as the outgroup. You're just the radio DJ broadcasting at them again.
Exactly. By removing your company name and leading with an action verb tied to a problem they are actively experiencing, you completely bypass that threat detection.
You align yourself with their self-interest.
You are no longer a vendor pushing a product. You are a potential solution to the actual friction in their day.
Okay, so the subject line works. They click open. The text then talks about the salutation and this concept of becoming the unstranger.
The unstranger is such a fascinating psychological concept.
Break that down for us.
Prospects, especially those fiercely protective of their curated bubbles, they respond to friends, not strangers.
Naturally.
So you must establish a psychological foothold of trust instantly. You begin with a warm, friendly salutation. You introduce yourself briefly, but the tone is really what matters here.
It has to be entirely pressure-free.
Exactly. It should read like a helpful note from an acquaintance who happened to see something you might find useful, not some sort of transactional demand.
The text also insists heavily on front-loading. We have to put the main idea at the absolute beginning of the email.
This goes right back to the neuroscience of triage. When someone opens an email, you have roughly 3 to 5 seconds before they make a binary decision. Keep reading or delete.
Wow, 3 to 5 seconds.
Front-loading is the ultimate sign of respect for their time. It signals, I know you are overwhelmed. Here is the exact value I am bringing to you right now.
Because if you bury the punchline at the bottom of a 4-paragraph email, Generation Me will never scroll down to see it.
They're already gone. They've already toggled back to whatever they were multitasking on.
That brings up the negative rules in the text, the things you absolutely must not do.
These are so important.
It states firmly, no all CCAP yes. That one's pretty obvious, right? It visually implies screaming and aggression.
Nobody likes being yelled at in an email.
Right. But the text also draws a really hard line against abbreviations. It explicitly says no FYI and no ASAP.
Yep, none.
Now, this is where I really struggle, and I bet a lot of our listeners do too.
It's a tough one to swallow.
In fast-paced tech culture, abbreviations are literally the native language. Doesn't writing everything out formally make you sound, I don't know, robotic or completely out of touch?
It seems highly counterintuitive, especially since this is the generation that literally invented internet slang.
Exactly.
But this exposes a deep nuance in the psychology of communication. Abbreviations rely on a shared context. They inherently assume an in-group status.
Oh. Well,
When you use ASAP with a close colleague, it's a shorthand. It means, hey, whenever you have a free moment, this is important. There is mutual trust there.
right. It's just efficient between friends.
But when an out-group person, like a salesperson you barely know, uses ASA, the brain processes it entirely differently.
It strips away the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. It reads as a directive. It feels presumptuous, like you are actively attempting to command their time.
Do this as soon as possible.
Yeah.
That feels heavy.
It creates an immediate subconscious friction.
I honestly never thought about it like that. It triggers their defense mechanism because it's a subtle violation of their autonomy.
Precisely. And furthermore, abbreviations create cognitive speed bumps.
Speed buffs.
Yeah. The brain actually has to pause for a microsecond to decode the acronym. Your goal is absolute frictionless fluency.
So clear, simple, fully written out language removes all those cognitive hurdles.
It ensures the prospect never feels alienated or confused or commanded. It keeps the email firmly in that safe, pressure-free zone.
Which also completely explains the intense focus on visual formatting in the source.
Yes, the visual aspect is huge.
It calls for complete brevity. Flawlessness, meaning absolutely zero typos, no run-on sentences, no jarring mixed fonts from copy-pasting.
It demands plenty of white space, the use of bullets, and clear line breaks.
Because a dense wall of text is literally a visual threat.
It is. Before they read a single word, their brain registers the visual density of the paragraph and unconsciously calculates the energy required to process it.
And if it looks like a textbook,
They delete it. White space is a visual breath of air. It significantly lowers the cognitive barrier to entry.
and the final rule for the email, which is arguably the most important, a single call to action.
Only one. Just one. Do you want them to click a link? Do you want them to reply with a time to meet? Pick one.
What happens if you give them multiple options?
If you give a busy, overwhelmed person 3 different options, you induce decision fatigue.
And when the brain is faced with decision fatigue, it just defaults to the path of least resistance.
Which is always an action. They will close the email and tell themselves they will deal with it later.
And later never comes.
Later never comes.
So the actionable takeaway here for you listening is to do a strict audit of your outbound communication.
Before you send your next pitch, run it through this specific filter.
Does it visually breathe with plenty of white space? Is there only one unmistakable call to action? Have you front-loaded the core value in the very first 2 sentences?
Are you free of presumptuous abbreviations?
If you fail any of these, just rewrite it. You have to optimize for the exhausted, multitasking brain.
You are engineering a piece of communication designed specifically to survive the hostility of the modern inbox.
Okay, but email fundamentally has a ceiling, right?
It does.
No matter how perfectly crafted it is, email is still outbound. You are still initiating the contact, which means you are still, on some level, intruding on their space.
Right, you're knocking on the door.
So how do we flip the gravity? How do we build an environment where this control-hungry demographic actually wants to come to us?
That is the crucial pivot. You need an inbound mechanism to perfectly balance the outbound strategy.
And the text points to a very specific tool for this. The blog, functioning as an approachability engine.
The source material uses the term weblogs,
Such a throwback.
which firmly anchors us in that early Web 2.0 era we discussed. It describes them as interactive online journals used to share information, promote products, and answer customer concerns.
But while the word weblog might be super dated, The psychological principles it outlines are the exact foundation of all modern content marketing.
Absolutely. Whether you are writing a Substack, posting on LinkedIn, or filming a YouTube vlog, the medium changes, but the psychology is completely timeless.
The text emphasizes a very specific, deliberate tone for these platforms. It calls it the great idea just occurred to me vibe.
The great idea just occurred to me.
I want to really dig into the mechanics of that tone. It implies a total lack of intense premeditation. It feels totally spontaneous.
The text literally instructs you to write exactly like you speak, to freely share personal experiences, and to keep the posts short, simple, quote, jazzy and snazzy.
Jazzy and snazzy. And it even uses this slightly controversial phrase, spoon-feeding the reader.
Right, let's elevate that concept to spoon-feeding, because it initially sounds derogatory.
It does sound a little insulting.
But psychologically, it's just about reducing cognitive friction, exactly like the white space in the email.
What is truly fascinating is why this spontaneous tone is so addictive to Generation Me.
Think about the traditional corporate posture. Historically, a company's public face is heavily polished, vetted by 3 tiers of legal counsel, highly formalized, and completely devoid of human personality.
It's just a corporate robot. It is the epitome of the broadcast mass media they have been trained to ignore.
It is totally sterile.
Yes. The great idea just occurred to me. Tone is powerful because it shatters that corporate fourth wall.
It introduces what I call asynchronous vulnerability.
Asynchronous vulnerability. I love that term. So I am putting my unpolished thoughts out there, knowing they will read it later on their own time.
Exactly. It humanizes the transaction. When you write conversationally, you signal that there is an actual, flawed, interesting human being behind the corporate logo.
And the interactive nature of a blog, the fact that visitors can leave public comments, serves as incredible social proof.
When a prospect sees that you are answering questions openly and accepting public feedback, it definitively proves you are approachable.
It perfectly aligns with Generation Me's absolute demand to have their input valued.
You are actively shifting them from buying a static product to participating in a dynamic dialogue.
It makes me think about the difference between a pristine storefront and a messy back room.
Okay, tell me more about that.
A traditional corporate website is that perfect storefront window, right?
Yeah.
The lighting is immaculate. The products are perfectly staged.
It looks untouchable.
Exactly. You can look at the display, but you can't touch anything, and you certainly don't know the person who actually built it.
Right.
But a blog, or really any modern conversational content, is like inviting the prospect behind the counter into the messy back room.
Oh, I see where you're going.
You hand them a cup of coffee, you show them the half-finished prototypes, and you literally just talk about the mistakes you made that week. That vulnerability is the actual selling point, isn't it?
It absolutely is the selling point. Because vulnerability builds a parasocial relationship, a true sense of intimacy and trust, far faster than corporate polish ever could.
When you invite them into the messy back room, you fundamentally rewrite the power dynamics of the sales relationship.
How does the power dynamic change in your mind?
Well, in a traditional model, sales is inherently an adversarial negotiation.
Us versus them.
Right. I possess a product, you possess capital, and we sit across a table trying to outmaneuver each other to maximize our own gain.
But when you use a blog to transparently share ideas and openly solicit input, you rotate that dynamic 90 degrees.
You are no longer sitting across from them.
You are standing side by side with them, looking at a shared problem together. It is deeply collaborative.
That asynchronous vulnerability builds a uniquely resilient form of loyalty.
They aren't just buying your expertise, they are buying into the relationship they feel they have with you.
To ensure you are actually building that relationship and not just shouting into the void, the source material provides a rigorous 5-question checklist.
This checklist is so vital.
It acts as a gauntlet that any piece of content must survive before you hit publish. Let's walk through these because this is essentially a masterclass in behavioral content strategy.
Let's do it.
Question 1. Does the headline clarify the topic?
This immediately ties back to the concept of respecting their cognitive load. If your headline is cryptic, overly clever, or relies on pure clickbait to trick them into reading, you instantly burn their trust.
In a world of the daily me, they need to know within a fraction of a second if this content is relevant to their highly individualized needs.
Clarity always, always outperforms cleverness.
Question 2. Does the lead paragraph reveal who, what, and why?
We are seeing the front-loading principle from the email rules applied here to public content.
The why is the absolute linchpin, isn't it?
Completely. Why should this specific multitasking, overwhelmed person care about your post right now? What is the immediate, tangible benefit to their life or business?
If the why isn't explicitly clear in the first few sentences, they will simply scroll away.
Question 3, is the angle interesting?
This is what the text means by jazzy and snazzy.
Exactly. You cannot just post a dry recitation of facts or a spec sheet. You have to utilize narrative transportation.
You must wrap the core information in a personal anecdote, maybe a surprising historical parallel, or contrarian perspective.
You literally have to earn their attention by entertaining them while you educate them.
Question 4. Is it jargon-free?
Again, we return to the friction of the in-group versus the out-group. Jargon is an exclusionary language.
It makes people who don't know the acronyms feel stupid or left out.
If your ultimate goal is approachability, your language must be universally accessible. You want to sound like a smart, engaging friend explaining a concept at a dinner party, not a professor reading from a textbook.
And finally, question 5, which really ties the entire strategy together. Does it end with a question designed to evoke comments?
This is the ultimate manifestation of the interactive DJ handing over the microphone.
You have presented your great idea, you have shown your vulnerability, but you deliberately leave the conclusion open.
You explicitly ask for the reader's expertise, their lived experience, their dissenting opinion. You formally invite them to take control of the narrative.
It closes the loop perfectly. So the mandate for you, the listener, is clear. Treat this 5-question checklist as absolute law.
Before you publish a blog post, a newsletter, or a major social media update, force yourself to answer these 5 questions.
And never hit publish without ensuring you have actively solicited the reader's opinion to hand back that locus of control.
It is the only reliable way to break the broadcast habit and force yourself into an interactive, co-creative mindset.
We have covered a massive amount of psychological ground today.
We really have.
We navigated the historical and cognitive shift from traditional mass media to the bespoke media revolution.
We explored the continuous partial attention of Generation Me and why honoring their curated digital bubble is an act of empathy, not pandering.
We dissected the neuroscience of the inbox, learning exactly how to engineer frictionless, front-loaded emails that slip under the door without triggering threat responses.
And finally, we explored how asynchronous vulnerability, the messy backroom of a blog, flips the adversarial sales dynamic into a collaborative inbound community.
And when you synthesize all of these concepts, a single definitive insight emerges. It really is the soul of this entire chapter of the source material.
What is that core insight for you?
It's the realization that technology in business is not a megaphone.
A megaphone, right.
If you treat digital tools simply as a way to shout your traditional sales pitch louder and to more people simultaneously, you will only drive them deeper into their digital fortresses.
Modern technology is a finely tuned, highly sensitive instrument. Its true purpose is to invite the individual buyer to co-create the conversation,
ultimately putting them squarely in the spotlight where they expect and, frankly, deserve to be.
You aren't pitching to an audience anymore. You're collaborating with a co-star.
Exactly. Your role is no longer to persuade through dominance. Your role is to facilitate their success and their self-expression.
This has completely changed how I view outbound and inbound communication.
It really reframes everything. But, it leaves us with a massive looming question.
The ultimate stress test of the relationship.
Right. Because you can master the digital approach, you can navigate the media revolution, you can pierce the bubble with the perfect email, and you can build a fiercely loyal community through your approachable content.
But eventually, the digital screen has to go away.
Eventually, you get them face-to-face, you present the final solution, and they look you right in the eye and hit you with, "This looks great, but I need to think it over."
The stall. It is the moment where most digital-first sales strategies completely fall apart.
Next time on the deep dive, we are going to crack the code on the psychology of stalling and how to turn a firm maybe into an enthusiastic yes when you are finally in the room.
It requires a completely different set of psychological tools.
I cannot wait to get into that. Until next time, remember, in a world of infinite choices and endless noise, handing back control to your prospect might just be the most powerful way to win their trust.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.